YouTube channel, the Warrior Soul of Goji, you'll see there's a live stream starting. I will send you the link over to it.
Oh, I have it.
Hey, what's going on, everybody out there on YouTube? This is our first live stream over YouTube. We normally do these over Facebook, but this is kind of a weekly question and answer session that we give to everybody. And anybody who wants to ask us questions can ask us questions about anything. It's about fitness, fat loss, performance, whatever it is, we can do it. So I'm just sending a link over to my buddy Matt, and I'll introduce him in a second here. Let me see. I'm going to get back on here. All right, cool. I'm sending you the link over, bud. Cool. All right. I'm going to start our broadcast on the platform. All right. I think we're good, brother. You good on your end?
Yep.
Awesome. I'm just gonna throw a sweatshirt on because I'm freaking cold in here for some reason. I think the AC is getting good on you. Yep. Awesome. I'm just gonna throw a sweatshirt on because I'm freaking cold in here for some reason. Yeah. What the hell is that?
Oh, you know, just a little bit of 80s television. I'm kidding. Yeah, so anyways, if you get anyone from the Rodon and Fields corporate wellness seminar hitting you up, that's why. I don't know that they would. I gave them mainly to Keto Camp and a Goji resource.
We'll talk about that offline, man. You're live streaming right now. Like 2000s.
All right.
It's
there are no secrets here.
Yeah, it's okay. There are no secrets here, but we can talk about that offline. Anyways, for everybody the millions of people, I'm sure that this live stream is going to go out to, well, maybe it's going to be more like a couple of hundred, but for everybody out there, this is a live session that I do with my brother Matt. Each week, we take questions about ketosis, about performance, about fitness, about brain health, about nutrition in general. So if you're not a keto person, don't worry. You can still ask us questions, anything you want. We're not the keto guys, as we like to say. Just so you know a little bit about Matt here. Matt is my brother. He is a good friend of mine who I've known for quite a long time. He started as a client of mine, and he's a biohacker, a trainer, a veteran of the supplement industry. And he right now he's working up there in Silicon Valley, but he's soon to come to a little place called Long Beach, California, very, very soon. And he's going to be taking residence up in one of the gyms down there. Which gym is it going to be?
Metroflex Long Beach, which you know a little something about, right? You've heard of?
Yes, I know quite a bit about it. So Eddie's taking Matt under his wing, and he's bringing Matt in. But Matt has his own wings. Like I said, he's a veteran of the supplement industry. He consults with many companies up there in Silicon Valley, and he's an expert on ketosis. He's an expert on nutrition and healing from drug addiction. He's an expert on performance. He's worked with a lot of professional athletes, and he's my co-author on the Warrior Soul Keto Camp. So really great to have Matt around here. And like I said, we try to cover different types of things each week. Matt, anything new on the agenda for this week?
Yeah, actually, one thing that I'd like to talk about, and I think this is important for a lot of people watching at home because they may not have heard this in conventional realms of the health and fitness industry, But I think what you're seeing right now is a rise of the nervous system being put to the forefront of health and fitness in various ways, right? So there's ways that it applies in the addiction work that I do when I'm helping people treat their addiction. And in addition to that, it also applies to just everyday health and fitness folk. And part of that is because your nervous system has various highway systems in it, if you will, and you have your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system. And unfortunately, in our society, especially those of us in places like California, New York, coastal, we're always in a state of go, go, go. And so what that means is that your body is always up in a sympathetic state, which means it's responding to stress. And that's good. You really need that, especially in, let's say, the gym, for example. That's a very acute stress. And that's something that you really want to make sure that you have intact. However, if you're living with sort of a perpetual chronic, even if it's mild, state of sympathetic nervous system activation, you're not able to get over into the parasympathetic side. And what that means is that you're actually never able to fully relax, let go, pay attention to the world around you. You're probably super intense to be around, and you're probably always consumed by thoughts. You're not really able to let go of them. In terms of health and performance, this has downstream effects on your hormones. It can actually impact things like testosterone function, estrogen regulation, thyroid function, adrenocortical response. And believe it or not, even though cortisol gets made out to be a bad guy, initially you have this perpetual cortisol spike, which causes a lot of issues. But from there, it pivots almost like if you were to overtax your adrenal glands and those receptors, and your body actually doesn't produce enough cortisol. So that's another, on a hormonal level, just one sample issue that can be caused from this. But just in terms of quality of life, if you're always in a sympathetic state of your nervous system, there's really no way to live, pretty poor existence.
Yeah, dude. So when we talk about the central nervous system, because it's kind of one of those buzzwords that comes out a lot, everybody's talking about their CNS, things like that. Can you kind of explain that? What should people be worried about here? What systems are we looking at here?
So you're looking at a few different ones. You're looking at the, so parasympathetic, sympathetic, and then you're looking at your autonomic nervous system in that respect. And then you also have your central nervous system.
Yeah, but explain because when we talk sympathetic, parasympathetic, and autonomic, a lot of people at home don't know what that means. So
right.
You go into what each one does.
Sure. So basically, your nervous system is almost like the remote control for your body. Just simply think of it like that. And within that, you actually have different departments, if you will. It's almost like you have an HR department. You know what I mean? You have like the sales department, and then you have a management department. So essentially, your nervous system is what's telling your body to move, like me holding my hand up like here. That's my central nervous system actually telling me to move. And that's, a link that goes down from my brain into my spinal cord that then reaches out and drives movement, if you will. And then we also have the autonomic nervous system. We have parasympathetic, sympathetic. That's essentially how your body is dealing with inputs, if you want to think of it like that. And I think it's probably the easiest way to put it, maybe a little bit of a black and white oversimplification, but I think for our audience here, it probably is the best way to put it, and just conceptualize it as, again, the remote control to your body. It's like telling everything else what to do and also directing traffic.
Okay, so when we get into this kind of stuff, we've been looking at a lot of different things coming on the horizon now. Like you have Wim Hof and you have Brian McKenzie doing breathing techniques to help you to grasp control of your nervous system and your immune system. And we're always hearing about people going from parasympathetic to sympathetic. What's the benefit of trying to get yourself back into the sympathetic state?
So getting into a sympathetic state is great because it actually allows you to deal with and react to stress. It allows you to combat things like day-to-day stress that life throws at you. It also allows you to just react well in the gym and actually drive the workout itself and also facilitate the adaptations to it, meaning when you tear down that muscle in the gym, rebuilding it stronger. The nervous system is involved in that process, amongst a lot of other molecular processes going on under the hood, if you will. But most of us don't spend enough time on the opposite side, or the parasympathetic side. And that's the side where you're a little bit more mellow and you are able to just let go of thoughts and not be consumed by stress. Your body is essentially in chill mode, if you want to think of it like that. And what that allows us to
digest, correct?
Say that again.
Rest and digest. When people
rest and digest. That's the best way you can put it. So you want to make sure you spend a lot of time detoxing and coming down from a lot of that hyperactivity, whether that means like stimuli, like social media, whether that means overtraining in the gym, whether that means, in my case, when I'm working with addicts, giving yourself a lot of drugs too. So in general, as a society, I think we're way too overstimulated and we don't spend enough time. And that's why you've seen this rise recently of mindfulness practice. You've seen things like reconnection, going outdoors, going barefoot on the ground, getting extra sunlight, meditating, and things like that too. And you're seeing people who are looking at the science behind it finally, instead of just thinking it's on the woo side of things, and then tying that back to everything else. Because let's face it, we want to be in the gym training. We have lives, we have work that we need to get done. So just knowing how to navigate that space, I think, is important. And it's also important because I think a lot of people who are maybe eating healthy and training right and paying attention to things like that, and they're like, why do I still not feel great on far too many days?
Right. And that's something I've been doing a series here on YouTube about energy and about fatigue, right? And things you can do to fight fatigue. And we've been going into different things like hydration and the impact of hydration on your energy and your fatigue levels. And a lot of people don't understand the importance of hydration in allowing you to navigate between those two systems. If you're dehydrated, your body is stressed. You are seriously putting yourself through a lot of hell, and you have a constant release of stress hormones. But when you're hydrated, and that means, as I said in the video I put up here, it's a two-way street. You need both water and minerals to be properly hydrated. Then you're going to be able to navigate that space a lot more. But I think the bigger thing for this community that we're speaking to you right here on YouTube are the actual amount of stimulants they're putting into their bodies. Over the past, I guess, decade or so, pre-workouts have kind of taken the supplement industry by storm. And we have a lot of different, very strong pre-workouts that people are putting in their bodies. Now, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was, and this is back in 2003 when I was in Iraq, we were taking ripped fuels like they were crazy or like they were free, and I actually got some of that pure, what was that stuff called? The shit. I forget the chemical name. I'm freaking brain dead right now from too many stimulants. But I used to take so much of that stuff. I would take like 7 pills of that a day, and then I would be drinking like 5, 6, 7 cups of coffee a day. I've been a stimulant addict pretty much my whole life. But people are putting this stuff into their bodies like crazy, and they're not really realizing the impact that it's having on their adrenal system, their hypothalamic, pituitary adrenal axis, and all kinds of different things.
So we have a few questions that I'd like to take a point to ask at this point. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, just know that the questions are great. We want to make sure that we drive this discussion forward. Chris and I have been very clear that we're really not into the whole pop version of fitness, health, and now, keto is an extension of that that's been going on. We want to just use the right information to help you guys. And as much as we might want to talk about some of the sciencey stuff, we want to give you guys actionable items that you can take and use on your own ultimately. Mm-hmm. So Nate Rodabaugh had a question, other than caffeine, what stimulants come in these supplements? And actually Mike Cotton had a great response, epinephrine. Yeah, so epinephrine is actually a neurotransmitter, and as far as caffeine goes, something you're going to find in supplements, you're actually going to find things like teacrine or theacrine, and it's actually a kissing cousin of caffeine. You're going to find it in Brazilian plants. You can find chemically altered geranium oil, which is like the 1,3-dimethylalanine that's been since banned, but they re-put back on the market in the form of AMP citrate. So all kinds of stimulants like that. Back in the day, we had ephedra. I'm sure, Chris, you know, you've been in the industry long enough. You remember those days, right?
Yep, that was what I was talking about, ephedra. I used to get these pure ephedra pills.
Yeah. And that stuff was wild. That stuff would really drive up your heart rate and everything. And also, of course, if you're doing something pharmaceutical, you know, something like clenbuterol obviously is going to really overstimulate you too. And now if we go back on YouTube, I want to make sure, because there's been some great questions on there. So we've got a few questions. So
there's one I want to address over here. You know, I want to get back to the energy question, but somebody said, Chris, you were one of the most jacked physiques I've seen on keto. Most of the keto males I see are very skinny. Can you explain how you achieved this? You know, that's a big question. You know, I was keto for a lot of the time while I was bodybuilding, but for a lot of the time I also wasn't. And what I can say is this, that if you look at the time when I wasn't keto versus the time when I was, I actually looked a lot better while on a keto diet. Now, how did I do it, and why was I able to achieve it that way? Well, one of the things I realized while I was competing in bodybuilding was that this singular notion of bodybuilding not actually being very healthy for you. It was one of the hardest times of my life prior to getting onto the keto diet, when I was still eating, you know, 8 small meals a day, and I was eating tons and tons of protein. I was layering some carbs on top of that, layering some vegetables on top of that, not getting a lot of nutrient density, not taking care of my systems. You know, I was, for all intents and purposes, abusing my body into becoming more muscular, and my body reacted. And so what was happening with me was I started to get digestive and gut issues because of the bodybuilding diet. Now, you might say that's a rare thing, but I would also argue that a lot more people have gut issues doing normal bodybuilding diets and trying to bulk than who actually report them. We've all heard of protein farts before. We've all walked into a gym where people are experiencing gastrointestinal issues and things like that. And I would say that there's probably a lot more bodybuilders out there who have problems that are very similar to mine than actually report them. And I actually get notes from people who do have problems that were very similar to mine every single day here on YouTube. And what I would say is that when I actually tried ketosis, it made my physique better. It made me stronger because I was actually treating my body better. I was doing things to fight off inflammation. I was eating more nutrient-dense food. I was actually getting more vegetables in when I was on a ketogenic diet. And I'm still on a ketogenic diet today. I just don't do bodybuilding anymore. And so you ask me how I was able to achieve this, and the answer is that it actually took a lot less effort than it did at any other point in my bodybuilding career, because I was giving my body the things it needed. It needed fat, it needed micronutrients, it needed food that was digestible, and it needed food that was going to help me to fight off inflammation. And to your point about there not being a lot of bodybuilders out there who are doing keto, who look good, there's actually a lot of them. There's a lot of people trying it now, and Matt and I will get into the kind of pop notion of keto that's about right now. There's some people who have come out and said they love keto now, but you take Mark Bell, who's somebody that I respect a whole lot, and who's somebody that has done a lot here in the strength industry. He's doing ketosis now. His brother Chris is as well. You've got a bunch of people out there who are trying this. They're seeing how it works, and they're getting a lot of benefit from it. And the other thing I will just tell you is that I was also for a very long time, I've been hitting the weights. Now that was on and off. Obviously, I took some time to be a Marine Corps infantryman, which doesn't lend itself well to adding muscle to your body. But if you're doing it for a long time, you know that stuff gets encoded into your genes. I was able to build quite a bit of muscle once I in order. Any takes on that, Matt?
Yeah, I think that you have to give yourself time on the diet too, because it depends on the diet you were on previously. But you can definitely add lean body mass on a ketogenic diet. It's just, like anything else, you can't outrun what I would call thermogenesis, right? So in the laws of thermodynamics, you'll still need to eat a surplus to do it in terms of your food more than you're burning. But at the same time, what you need to also consider is the fact that, like Chris said, you want to make sure you're driving your health. So I think if you follow some of Art Devaney, who's like the godfather of the paleo movement's work, you'll see that it's really important to take some times where you're actually letting yourself go hungry. And so because of that, you might consider going through certain days where maybe you're not training, like with resistance, and have those be days where you actually give yourself a calorie deficit. And it's a lot safer to do that because your activity level is lower. And then maybe on some of those days where you're strength training, allowing yourself to have a calorie surplus on those days allows you to have the best of both worlds. So you're burning the fat, but you're also building lean body mass. And it used to be an old bodybuilding notion that you can only do one or the other at a time. And I used to subscribe to that theory. But I think the more, I've gone down the pipeline, the more, I tell my clients, hey, you can't guarantee anything, but expect to gain lean body mass and burn fat at the same time. That's usually what happens if you're doing it right.
What do you think about that? Because I saw you grin a little bit. The notion I brought up that there's probably a lot more bodybuilders who have gut and health issues that are not reporting them than we think there are. And I know we're slipping into propositions and not basing anything on evidence. But do you think that there's a lot of issues out there that aren't being reported?
100%. And I also think that, being kind of someone who's worked in like the clinical setting and also in the athletic realm, and I have a ton of passion for helping both types of people. It's like the athletes are the worst people I've ever seen. And I'm counting bodybuilders and a lot of like more hardcore fitness gym goers in that category too. But you guys are, and I was one of them, they're the worst people at reporting symptoms. They kind of are, everything's just sort of something that they've dealt with and an obstacle that they've beaten or still scored against or won the championship in spite of in the past. And so they sort of have that tough guy mentality and they don't even really know it because it's just their operating space. They're not trying to be. But I think because of that, it's important for a lot of these people to get familiar with their body and listen to your body. And sometimes it takes getting a little bit older, like approaching your 30s and beyond, to be able to pay attention to, oh, wow, my gut hurts every time I eat beans or wheat or gluten or refined sugar or something like that, or this artificial sweetener. Whereas in the past, you kind of just farted and moved on.
Yeah.
Which describes my dating life too, by the way.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. A lot of us, I remember drinking these protein shakes, and they'd give me massive intestinal discomfort, and then I'd be like, well, I don't give a fuck. I'm getting swollen. I'm getting jacked right now, And I think a lot of people have that mentality where they put themselves through some discomfort, some things come up health-wise, and you see this so much on bulking. People are sitting there and they're trying to shove food down their throats, and a lot of people don't realize you can't eat as much protein as a pro bodybuilder does. And if you try it, you're going to face some repercussions. It takes some work. It takes some time to get up there to even be able to tolerate that. And then you have to understand that, again, a lot of these guys aren't very healthy. That's not to say anything negative about them or negative about the lifestyle. I absolutely love the sport. But at some point, you have to make some choices. And for a lot of us, it's gonna be looking at our own genetics and understanding what we're capable of. Now, you can have an amazing physique, you look great, but there's only about 0.0001% of you that are be able to. And then you have to ask yourself, what's the cost if I try to push myself there? And there is a health cost. There's a health cost because a lot of people point to the steroids, and obviously that's a concern, but the steroids are only part of the issue. The diet, the lifestyle, everything else you got to do is also a huge impact on your health, your life, your ability to do things. for me, I wanted to be fit not just through my 20s and 30s. I want to be able to train all the way up till I'm in my 70s and 80s. That's the thing. I've been in situations where I've been in a hospital and I couldn't control my colon. And I don't want to be there again. I don't want to be there whether I'm 38. I don't want to be there whether I'm 58 or whether I'm 78. I want to be active for the rest of my life. And everything I'm doing now is what's pushing me toward that.
I couldn't agree more. And I also think that people need to realize that health drives performance. I used to think, when I would hear people talk about health back when I was more, in my bodybuilding days, when I was, at the same height, but 225 pounds, I used to be like, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to listen about herbals, botanicals, general health. Like, I'm working out and I'm eating right. So none of that stuff's ever going to happen to me. And it was really a reductionist way of thinking. And it wasn't until I actually paid attention to things like that and ate a very nutrient dense ancestral diet. And also was still, to the other side of the coin, that's something that I think the camp with like the yogis and the holistic people could borrow from. I was still pounding the weights the right way. I was still training intensely. Once I married both of those two worlds, that's really when my best quality of life came to be, how I was thinking clearest and still am now, and also my best results on a fitness level too. So I actually think it's like holistic savagery, if you will, is probably the way to go at some level if I had to put a label on it. I do want to answer a few questions though. So back on the Zoom link, Nate had a great question. He said, Chris, what periods of time do you stay in ketosis versus a modified Atkins? Listening to Dr. Dominic D'Agostino on Joe Rogan this week, Dr. D discussed how a modified Atkins diet provides 90% of the benefits of ketosis and a slightly higher calorie intake, making it necessary to count macros. Nate, the reason I took that question and not Chris, I hope that's all right, is because Chris actually follows more of a traditional ketogenic diet, where his protein is moderate, so, probably even bordering on the low side. I, however, follow something that's probably a little bit closer to a modified Atkins diet. And then also DJ, who asked the question before, I do cyclical carb refeeds probably a little more frequently than Chris would. But I'm also a little bit younger than Chris. And that's something that's important to point out is if you follow guys like Peter Attia and some of the guys who've really been able to hack ketosis and go beyond the pop version of keto that's going on, have really been able to demonstrate that ketosis is really a spectrum. And being in ketosis just means you're fat adapted. And you can be all the way into full ketosis, like Chris is probably almost all the time, just as much as anybody I know. And then you have someone like me who's in the spectrum and goes as far as Chris does, but also maybe have some days where I'm not quite there. And the reason for that is that my body just seems to do better on a slightly higher protein intake. Now, it's still considerably low compared to most bodybuilding diets, but maybe slightly higher. We're talking like maybe 15% than your average ketogenic diet. So the modified Atkins diet can be better for those of you who maybe get an inflamed liver or a fatty liver if you have too much fat. And that is the case for some people. If you maybe don't have enough of the enzymes that break down the fats, your liver could get inflamed, in which case a full-on keto diet may not be the best for you.
People who have their gallbladder removed or something like that too.
Right, yeah, your gallbladder's been removed. So you could stay on the full-on ketogenic diet to get the most benefits out of it, like Chris does, and then maybe consider taking a supplement like ox bile extract, and then go from there. Or if that's still not working for you, and maybe let's say your liver enzymes are still elevated on the lab test, you may want to consider replacing some of those calories with a little bit of protein, or hey, maybe even a little bit of carbohydrate like resistant starch, for example. So I hope that helps. And then going back to YouTube, just to answer.
I want to address that real quick too.
Yeah.
As far as the diet I follow, a lot of people on YouTube, they ask me to do these full day eating videos, and I laugh about that because it would be the most boring video ever. Being a little bit older than most people who watch my channel on YouTube, I can say this with confidence. None of you want to eat like I do. It works for me. I love the way I eat. And generally my first meal of the day is a smoothie. I put a video up about that before, and it's got 2 whole avocados in it. 3 cups of greens, some raw cacao, some full fat coconut milk, and that sustains me all the way through my day up to dinner. And I'll add in some MCT oil to my water and things like that. But I don't eat much. And the reason I don't eat much is because I'm older. I'm not trying to pack on pounds and pounds of muscle right now. My main focus is on digestion, making sure that my digestive health is good, making sure that my brain health is good. So I focus on getting enough fats into my body to produce ketones, and making sure that I'm getting neuroprotectants into my body, like omega-3s. And then, dinner, I love cooking. I cook for my girlfriend, who's a lot younger than me. Not to brag, but she's 10 years younger than I am. And so I cook a lot for her. And, I make sure that she has everything she needs nutritionally. I actually cook breakfast for her, even though I don't eat breakfast. That's the thing. I don't expect everybody to eat like I do, which is why I don't do these full day of eating things. And that being said, though, nutritional ketosis, despite the lack of eating, has kept a good amount of muscle on my body. And I do add carbs back in when I am very, very active. So there's days in my week I love training. I have to pull myself back from training. And, most of my training right now is Olympic lifting. I do squats and deadlifts and things like that. I don't bench press anymore because I do Jujitsu, and it's really easy to submit a bench presser. But I do a lot of that kind of stuff now, and I do a lot of conditioning, and lots of sprints, lots of kettlebells, lots of metcons and things like that. So if I'm doing one of those days where I'm doing a run, I'm doing metcon, maybe a lifting session, and doing jujitsu practice, then I'll definitely add some carbs in by the end of the day, and I'll usually get up to somewhere around 150, 200 grams on super active days, but then I'll peel it back down.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot more considerations the older you get too. Chris is still pretty young at 38, right?
Were you about to say 45?
Yeah, I was going to guess younger. So the older you get too, the more that I find people tend to have issues digesting protein, and that's not something that's going to go for everybody. But protein, actually, part of why a lot of bodybuilders have targeted it is because it takes the most work to break down. It's also the hardest nutrient to store as fat. That being said, part of that is because it takes work to break it down. Actually, breaking it down causes your body to burn more calories than any other nutrient. So it's not as efficient as far as like energy tools, and then also because of the fact that it takes a lot of work to break down as you age. So the older you get, the easier on paper it should be to follow more of a conventional ketogenic diet. But if you're a strapping young lad like myself at the tender age of 28, you can be able to do a little bit more protein. Now, I want to get back to the YouTube questions. We have some great questions on there too. So let's see here. DJ also wanted to ask whether periodic carb ups are more optimal for muscle gain than a strict ketogenic diet, or will strict keto make muscle gain more slow but stay leaner? That's actually a phenomenal question, DJ. And the reason for that is because it'll also depend on your training. So if you're doing a lot of more like I'm going to get pumped kind of conventional bodybuilding training, like let's say low to moderate weight and higher reps, you're going to, for the most part, gain a lot of what you call sarcoplasmic muscle mass. And that's the type of muscle where if you go on vacation, you lose that pump and it doesn't look as good. But assuming that you're also, like, let's say you're on a ketogenic diet and then you're training with high enough weight, you don't have to deadlift the whole gym, but high enough weight to challenge your own strength thresholds, you're actually going to build a little bit more of that like thick muscle mass that stays on you, almost at that wiry muscle mass look that Chris and I have. And that's all, like if you want to look at like a wide receiver in the NFL, that's the same kind of muscle mass. It's not all bulked like a bodybuilder. So I would say the ketogenic diet will support that kind of training a ton. And the good thing about working with those kind of heavier strength loads is that your body also tends to clear out a ton of muscle glycogen that it has stored too. So what that means is that you can probably be a little bit more flexible with your diet if you're tearing down the muscle and working it to that degree. and maybe have maybe a little bit more protein or amino acids, and also maybe consider even going slightly higher carbs on your low carb days, and or do some type of regular carb refeeding, whatever that looks like. So I do think that regular carb refeeds tend to work better for people who are actually, really pushing themselves with resistance training, jujitsu, or some other type of activity that's intense and also burns carbs mainly. Just when I say activities burning certain nutrients, just so you guys know, there are three main metabolic pathways in the body. There is the phosphagen system, and that's the one that kicks in when you sprint. And that one is largely fueled by ATP, which is like an energy currency of your body produced from a cellular level outward. There is the glycolysis pathway, and that's the one that burns carbohydrates or stored carbs. So what we call glycogen, and that's things like resistance training, jujitsu, MMA. If you were to do sprints longer than just one sprint, you're going to work that system too. And then the third one is the lipolysis pathway, or the fat burning pathway. And that's something that like Chris and I are burning right now because we're just sitting here chilling, probably you guys too. That's something that longer duration activity like those endurance runners, general running, most cardio activities are going to burn too. And it's also important to know that you're never fully in just one. You're using some degree of all of them, but when we say an activity is glycolytic or lipolytic, it means it's mainly burning whatever that fuel is. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, one thing to bring up is that Volek study from the University of Connecticut. Have you taken a look at that study? That's an amazing study.
I've seen a lot of his work. What's the title of that study?
Metabolic characteristics of keto-adapted ultra-endurance runners.
Yeah, exactly. We actually sourced that one. We cited that one in our book.
Yep. And that's the thing, guys. If you take a look at this study, and I'll see if I can put a link up for it, but the study actually took two groups of ultra endurance runners. Now, a lot of you are out there like, dude, these are ultra endurance runners. So why does this study apply? Well, the study applies because of what they found. Basically, they took two groups of ultra endurance runners. They fed one group a high carb diet for 6 months, and they fed the other group a high fat diet for 6 months. And they put them through a 3-hour trial. Halfway through the trial, and this trial was on a incline treadmill. And halfway through the trial, they took muscle biopsies. And what they found was that one, the runners actually fat a lot more efficiently. They burned way more than the high carb runners during the trial. Two, they actually found that there was better glycogen retention amongst the fat runners. And that's because they were utilizing more fat for fuel rather than actually utilizing their glycogen stores. Now, well, the way that this applies to you guys is if you're dieting and you kind of lean out while maintaining muscle mass and you're in a fat adapted state, it's actually going to be much more beneficial for you to be in that fat adapted state because you're going to be able to get through workouts a lot easier with that retention of glycogen. Single study, I don't want to put too much credit into it, but it's a fascinating study and one that shed a lot of light on metabolic characteristics of those who are fat adapted. There were a couple of other ones here that I just wanted to address. And this is a good one from Mike Cotton. And he said, how long does it take to get into ketosis from scratch? I've been trying for at least 5 weeks. Any tips? My gym sessions are sucking ass at the moment while I'm trying to get adapted. I'm losing my gains at the moment. So a couple of things here, Mike. There's specific parts of your body that are really going to count here. Number one is your liver. And you need to make sure that your liver is good and healthy while you're trying to be adapted, right? So, and the reason for that is because your liver is what helps produce ketones. So, a few things I would definitely consider here. Number one is I would include apple cider vinegar into your regimen. It helps to detoxify the liver. I put a few drops in my water every single morning. I actually just spilt it all over my desk like a champ. But I put a few drops of apple cider vinegar in my water every single morning. And I'll take a little bit of apple cider vinegar after each meal that I have. And that'll help to lower your blood sugar, and it'll also help to cleanse out the liver a bit. Number two, couple of supplements. I'd highly recommend taking something like N-acetylcysteine. That's a precursor to glutathione. It helps with cellular turnover. I'd also look at, taking things like dandelion root extract and milk thistle to help with that cleansing process during the adaptation phase. Now, as far as the feeling and the energy part of this, a lot of this actually probably doesn't have to do with you switching over to fat adaptation. It probably has a lot more to do with your mineral intake right now. And that's because when you lower carbs and you start to try to adapt, one of the things that happens is you start to push water out of your body, right? Your kidneys get super active because you don't have carbohydrates in the system. They start pushing water out of the body, and along with those, so go electrolytes. And so one of the things you want to start including in your diet a lot is Himalayan salt, Himalayan pink salt. The reason why I say that kind of salt and not iodized salt is because that salt has all the minerals you need, right? And that will allow you to gain the benefits. It's kind of like nature's Gatorade, right? It's going to allow you to get those electrolytes in. And again, I like to add that to my water in the morning, and I'll drink water with Himalayan pink salt a couple times through the day. You need to get those electrolytes right, and those are going to be the biggest impact on your workouts. If you don't have them, you're not going to have the energy you need. You're going to have a lot of fatigue, and I spoke about that in my hydration video. The next thing you really want to pay attention to is the amount of potassium. Was there a shirtless man walking behind you, Matt?
Yeah.
Cool.
I think there's actually a really nice, wholesome reason why that happened, but I just think for comedy's sake, I'm not going to explain it.
Okay, cool. Anyways, potassium. I say potassium weird because I'm from New England, but you want to make sure that you're getting potassium in your diet. All right. Now, for ketosis, one of the biggest sources of that is going to be avocados. Avocados are a fantastic source of potassium. I eat a few of them every day, and this is really going to help with your energy levels. Yeah, I'm still laughing about that.
That's going to happen again pretty soon.
Is magnesium. You want to make sure that you're getting magnesium into your diet as well, and you get that from spinach, almonds. You can also supplement with, and I tend to take 400 to 500 milligrams a night before I go to sleep. And again, that'll also help with your energy level. And then you really want to start paying attention to your macros, right? So you want to make sure that you're getting enough fat. You want to see where that fat is coming from too. During your adaptation phase, you should be focusing on medium chain triglycerides. And if you've got when I'm talking about medium chain triglycerides, I'm talking about MCT. Dude, I'm about to laugh on this. I'm talking about MCT oil, right? So why do you want to focus on medium chain triglycerides? Because they're shorter chain fatty acids, right? And they process a lot better and a lot easier than the process into ketones a lot easier than longer chain fatty acids. So if you're doing a lot of dairy fat, if you're doing a lot of saturated fat during the adaptation phase, that's going to have an impact on your ability to process those ketones. You want to focus on those medium chain triglycerides in order to adapt more quickly. And beware of tester strips and things like that, because after you take MCT oil, the ketones in your bloodstream are going to be artificially raised. What is that, dude? What is going on there?
What was that?
What is that? I hear like,
Tech error.
okay, cool. Anyways, so that was that. Sorry, I couldn't stop laughing, guys. Any other questions over here?
Yeah, we do. We have someone asking about cardio on keto. Says I prefer to do HIIT or high intensity interval training on keto, but I always hear that's a no-no. So I've only been doing HIIT post refeed, get me back into ketosis faster, and then more steady state cardio. DHJ the third, that's a great question. We actually, when we wrote the Warrior Soul Keto Camp, we outlined how to reintegrate carbs, and one of those is some sort of cyclical refeed of ketosis. So what I would say is that if you're doing a moderate amount of a carb refeed, like let's say somewhere between 150 grams of carbs or less, and the following day you hit a strength training session, again, assuming that you are insulin sensitive, meaning your blood sugar levels and a few other things are working right, that's probably sufficient. However, if you're doing maybe something like a little lower than that, like 100 grams of carbs or less, a HIIT session of cardio or sprinting or maybe even going on the Concept 2 rower or Airdyne bike, those are definitely going to be sufficient for most people. However, if you're doing like a full-on carb refeed and hitting, like let's say a few to several hundred grams of carbs or more on one day out of the week, you're going to want to actually hit probably your worst, and by worst I mean hardest, strength training session at that time to make sure you clear out all of that stored muscle glycogen, essentially.
Yeah, I think that as far as cardio goes, I have to pull myself back from it a lot because I'm actually a cardio addict. I love being outside. I love running. I love doing all kinds of different things. I love doing burpees actually, and I love doing HIIT training because it helps me a lot with Jujitsu. I've never personally had
Your mic's going out a little, Chris.
Can you hear me? Yep. I can hook something up here if you want to. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, so I've personally never had a really negative impact from doing a lot of HIIT training. Now that being said, I've tried to be very smart about it, and I'm not one of these guys who tries to run myself into the ground every single day anymore. And when I say anymore, I think that's a very recent thing for me. I was one of these guys who'd survive on 4 hours of sleep a night, get up, run 5 miles, and then, come work for a while, then go to the gym, and then go to Jujitsu. But that led to some negative things in my life. But since I've been taking care of myself, since I've been really watching my mineral intake, making sure that I'm eating micronutritionally dense food, my digestive system, and getting a lot of sleep, I've been able to perform pretty well. And when I'm at Jiu-Jitsu practice, I might suck at Jiu-Jitsu technique-wise, but I'm never breathing hard. I can get through, a good roll without really breathing hard. And a lot of my training partners, they're heaving. So even if I am getting tapped out and choked and things like that. So.
And have you found that? Have you had any experience doing jujitsu, like not being on a keto diet consistently, or did those things kind of come into your life at the same time?
Funny story about this. I was on prednisone for a little bit, and then I had taken off of prednisone because you can't be on it for a while. It was due to some issues I was having with ulcerative colitis. And one of the things that happened was I started going through prednisone withdrawal because of adrenal burnout. And I actually was up in your area, up in San Francisco, doing a jiu-jitsu tournament while I was going through prednisone withdrawal, which, if you don't know, is hell. I didn't feel right at all, obviously. But that was the only time I could say when I probably wasn't in ketosis. I was doing that, but I've just been fat adapted so long now. It's pretty kind of standard for me. Anything else up here? One thing we also want to address here too is there's been a lot of negative, I guess you'd say, press about people doing the ketogenic diet. And obviously we get some characters up here on YouTube. We get some characters in the fitness industry who try
we get some characters walking behind me too.
Yeah, we get some characters doing things that they like to make like the pop version. And so you're seeing a lot of the pop version of ketosis out there right now. You're seeing a lot of the pop version of things. And so that makes good fodder for criticism and good fodder for critique. And you also see some people on the opposite side of the spectrum. And there's particular people here on YouTube who every chance they get, they try to badmouth the ketogenic diet. And my guess, because I've been talking about this for years, my guess is that those people see these very popular YouTube people picking it up, and that's why they're hating on it. So they need to figure out some sort of way of getting views. So they start talking about they have very little idea of, and the people they're criticizing actually have very little idea of. So, I think the thing is, guys, if you're really trying to understand ketosis, you definitely want to try to find other sources than I think what's up here on YouTube right now. I'm talking about like actually going to Jeff Volek and Stephen Finney's books, The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living, The Art and Science of Carbohydrate Performance. Actually listening to some of the stuff that Dr. Dominic D'Agostino has said on the podcasts like Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss, listening to Dom D'Agostino's question and answer session that he's put up there. And, really trying to find good resources for this type of information and educating yourself about it, whether you use it as a tool or not. A lot of people look at diets as kind of like a political party or like a cult or a religion. And I think that's the opposite of what this should be. You should think of ketosis as a potential tool for you. And it's a tool that's worked very well for me. It may or may not work for you. It may work better at certain points in your life than others. For instance, when you get to be my age, it might be something you might want to consider. If you're a little bit older as well, if you're younger than me, you might want to try something like cyclical ketosis or something like that, or you might want to stick with what you're doing currently. But the point is to find what works for you and to educate yourself about this process, because fat adaptation does have its advantages, and it is part of our evolutionary characteristic that we can do this. So knowing that it's part of our human evolution, you're going to figure out how you can leverage it for your advantage, leverage it for yourself. So, when we were putting together Warrior Soul Keto Camp, the last thing we wanted to do was to create a pop fad diet, which is why we came up with a lot of different alternatives for different lifestyles and different ways that you can use it. I think that there's too much cookie cutter philosophy out there in fitness industry today, and you really want to find a way that you're going to be able to modify anything you find out there for yourself. And you want to ask really good questions about what the impact's going to be on your health, on your ability to perform, on your ability to live the life you want to live. I think we definitely try to do these live question and answer sessions so that we can show you different ways of modifying whatever it is we're talking about for your own purposes.
You bet. There's one other question that I did want to tackle before we give people some nice resources on YouTube, I believe it was. No, it was actually on Zoom. So Michael Cotton asked a great question. He said, how do you know physically when you have burnt all of your glycogen stored up? Is that when the energy just isn't there anymore in the workout? That's a really good question, and it can totally depend on where you're at and if you're in ketosis or not. So if you're somebody who has a lot of blood sugar issues and maybe isn't fat adapted, you're not insulin sensitive. That means that your carbs are not going to be stored as muscle glycogen. They're more likely to circulate in your bloodstream or be absorbed a little bit more by the liver and stored there as liver glycogen. You're probably going to run into issues during your workout. You're going to find, all right, well, I'm still in that adaptation phase, and maybe it was too soon for a refeed because my workout quality is really suffering because I've blown through all my carbohydrates. And just to loop back on MMA for a sec, what's really funny is that if you look at, I guess not funny, but interesting, if you look at MMA, especially a lot of the early MMA days where you see the fighters were eating a lot like bodybuilders, you'll see a lot of the guys who weren't fat adapted gassing out early in the fight when you actually know that they would do plenty of cardio, they do plenty of training. There's no reason why they should be gassing out. It could be multifactorial, right? Like the wrong strength and conditioning, like the guys are doing running and thinking that that's going to get them the same benefits as doing other things like training and like, let's just say a power endurance phase. But just to kind of keep it nutrition based for right now, a lot of those guys are eating a ton of carbohydrates. And so you'll see in their fights, especially the ones that go longer with a guy like Alistair Overeem, for example, when you look at his fights, his longer ones, sometimes he would gas out and then he would get knocked out. And because MMA is a really glycolytic sport that burns carbs, it is good to be able to have a higher amount of carbs, especially maybe as you're going into a fight. But you also need to balance that out with periods where you're not eating as much carbs and you are fat adapted. And whether that means you're doing a little bit more fasting or a little bit higher of a fat intake, maybe on some of those days where you're not training, whatever that looks like, you need to make sure that you're metabolically flexible, because once Alistair would blow through all that stored glycogen, he would be borderline useless. I don't know too many fights that he won that, after he kind of gassed out like that. So nowadays, the research has come further where you're seeing guys conditioning become better, not just because the training science has been furthered, but also because the nutritional science has been furthered. But in your case, if you don't have access to some of the technology to measure these things, a good way to know when you've burnt out all of your glycogen is when you're qualitatively back in ketosis. And by that, I mean you have the same high mental focus, the same energy, the same ability to train for a long period of time. If you were to go out and maybe do cardio later on after you do a strength training session, so maybe the next day or something like that, and you have it, so to speak, and you can go for a long time, those are some pretty good collections of hallmarks, signs basically to know that you are back in keto. Of course, you could measure, the acetone in your breath as one solid way to do it. You could also use the urinalysis strips, although I'm not a huge fan of those. But yeah, I would say qualitatively is probably the easiest way to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you're in ketosis, you get kind of a feeling of just lasting energy. And it's not like a stimulant feeling. It's not like you just drink a cup of coffee or anything like that. It's like it's an extended feeling of really awesome. You will actually end up feeling a lot more calm, a lot more like that, because your mood's not being affected by the things that there's amazing benefits. So again, don't take our word for it. Get out there and do it yourself. Check some of these resources we're about to put up here too. Anything else over there, Matt?
Nope. I'm just, in the YouTube live chat, just so you know, guys, you can't post links. So if you go to, I'll say it now, if you go to warriorsoulketocamp.com, you can check out our program. You can also, is that the same URL that Sebastian updated to have the free resources on there for him?
Yep. It's warriorsoulketocamp.com. And
okay.
So what you're going to find there is a link to Warrior Soul Keto Camp. There will also be a pop-up for our newsletter if you want to get on there and get some of our free resources. We have a free cookbook, a free
adaptation guide,
grocery list.
Grocery list too.
Yep, and a bunch of free resources you can actually use to try to adapt to ketosis. We also offer Warrior Soul Keto Camp, which is, in my opinion, a very extensive online course that we do about ketosis. You get 2 courses in one. You get Warrior Soul Fitness Foundations, which teaches you about digestive health, hormonal health, how to achieve hormonal balance, sleep, flexibility, mobility, training, all these different things to lay your fitness foundation. And then you get Warrior Soul Keto Camp, which actually takes you through the whole process of everything from adaptation all the way up through maintenance. And we teach you about the specific foods you should be looking at, the specific types of foods you want to look at in different situations, different protocols for ketosis, because a lot of people are asking about carb cycling, when you should do it, how you should implement it, how long it should take to implement, and those types of things. So we have a whole section on carb cycling and cyclic ketosis in there. And then we've got sections in there on how to use ketosis to increase your brain power, increase your thought processes, increase your performance, and things like that. And this entire course, which also includes membership in our online Warrior Soul Fitness community, is only $47.97. One-time fee, in extremely, extremely inexpensive for the amount of value that you get here. Anything else you want to say about that, Matt?
No, you covered all bases essentially. If you have any after the clock shot questions, what I did want to say is feel free to shoot them our way. You can actually also follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook. You're going to look up Warrior Soul Agoji. For more information like this, the best thing you could do is to go onto warriorsoulketocamp.com. You can enter your name and email, and then you can get all those free diet resources. Plus, you can be notified next time we're doing a live, personalized, Ask Us Anything webinar just like this too. And of course, you'll be able to have access to us if you have any questions. If you want to join the camp, join our tribe, highly recommended. We're just trying to further along you guys on your health and performance.
Yep, absolutely. And you can find tons and tons of resources here on this channel. We've got you can find us on Facebook at Warrior Soul Agoji. Somebody asked me what Warrior Soul Agoji is, or what Agoji means. And basically, the history of Warrior Soul, we started as a company for veterans, a clothing company for veterans. And our mission is to help veterans and everybody else to live their best lives. But we focus on veterans because the veteran community has gone through a lot over the last decade. So if you listen to our podcast, the Warrior Soul podcast, my co-host down there is Andrew Marr, medically retired Special Forces Green Beret, who's been affected heavily by traumatic brain injury and had to heal himself through hormone replenishment. And we're looking at a lot of these alternative health prospects because of the physical job that the VA, I don't mean to disparage everybody at the VA, but the medical system in general has done as far as treating veterans for things like PTS and traumatic brain injury. And so we've noticed that my channel here, this fitness channel, has taken a turn from bodybuilding toward health. These are the reasons why. We have a bigger mission at hand. And so if you ever want to check out more about what Warrior Soul does outside of Warrior Soul Keto Camp, you can head over to agoge.com. And Agoji was the ancient Spartan academy where they trained Spartan warriors from the ages of 7 all the way up through
20. Boom. I think that is it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in and checking us out, letting us answer your questions. We appreciate your time. Appreciate you guys giving us a little bit of your time on a Saturday, no less. So again, we hope that we were able to deliver some value for you guys. So if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out.
All right. Thank you, guys. Peace.